was always a fragile journey. Noah never pushed me away, but he never called me mom either. Don't blame him. Truly. I just hope that one day when I asked, "Are you okay?" he would answer not out of politeness, but because he genuinely wanted to share. Lately, David has been busier than ever. Business trips that last for days, late nights at the office. Noah just turned 18, already taller than me, walking with the steady pace of someone ready to leave the nest. I felt like a guest in this borrowed house, quietly cleaning up, preparing dinners, and fading out of every important conversation. Then one morning, David said, "I'll be away on business for a few days. Can you keep an eye on Noah for me?" I nodded, not because he asked, but because I wanted to. Maybe this would be my last chance to step closer to the boy I had never truly reached with my heart. I suggested we go to the old seaside house, a place David once bought for a change of pace, but had left mostly unused for years. A quiet place, free from noise, nothing there but waves, sand, and hope. I didn't know what was waiting for me there, but I knew if I didn't begin now, I might lose something far more precious than the title of stepmother. The trip began on a windless afternoon. The car carried two people bound by a relationship that had yet to be named. Noah sat beside me in silence, earphones loosely in place, eyes fixed on the window as rows of roadside trees slipped quietly behind us. I didn't say much, not because there was nothing to say, but because I was afraid to break the fragile air that made us both feel safe. The seaside house appeared just as the sun kissed the horizon, casting a soft orange glow across the weathered roof tiles. Everything seemed frozen in time since the day it was built. The faintly stained white walls, the scent of aged wood in the ocean breeze, and the oak dining table with a small crack in the corner, the one David always promised to fix but never did. I opened the door and stepped inside as though returning to a memory long asleep. Noah followed behind me, quietly taking in the surroundings. I didn't know what he was thinking, but I saw those deep, unreadable eyes linger longer than usual on the crooked landscape painting in the living room. A moment later, he turned and asked softly, "How long are we staying?" I replied, "Until you feel ready to go." A vague answer, perhaps, but it was the truth. We had an early dinner, a simple meal of noodles I used to make for him when he was little. Not much was said, but I could feel something had shifted. The tension had lessened. The cold distance we were used to was no longer there, just two people learning again how to sit at the same table, to chew, to breathe. After dinner, I cleared the dishes. Noah got up to help but paused midway, leaning against the kitchen doorway. I heard his voice, low and gentle, like the ocean breeze outside. "Do you come out here alone often?" I froze for a second. "No, it's been a long time since I've come back. This place was meant to be something, but life swept everything away." Noah didn't respond, just nodded slightly. He turned and walked slowly down the hallway toward the backyard. I watched his figure, tall, but carrying a strange sense of loneliness. I wondered if he, too, was searching for something like I was, a feeling of belonging, a presence that didn't require permission. That evening, I sat on the porch, a thin scarf wrapped around my shoulders, a cup of hot tea in hand. The night sea was calm and briny, the waves lapping the shore like the steady breath of memory. Noah came out too, carrying a light jacket and a cold soda. He didn't sit beside me, but chose the chair opposite, across a small round table. Still, that presence, even without touch, was enough to ease something inside me. "I remember the first time we came here," Noel said quietly after a long silence. "I was still small. Dad had a meeting and Mom didn't come. I ran off to the beach and got lost. You were the one who found me." I turned to him, surprised. "I didn't think you remembered." "I do. I remember the way you held me. You didn't say anything, just wiped the sand from my face and held my hand so tight." I smiled sadly because I was afraid that if I let go, you'd disappear. Noah looked up at me, those eyes no longer guarded. For a moment, I saw something unfamiliar in them, a kind of understanding, a trace of regret, as if he too was reaching for something that had slipped away too long ago. We sat in silence for a long while. Nothing more needed to be said. The wind brushed past the porch roof. The waves kept rolling onto the shore. And somewhere inside me, something began to melt. Not from weakness, but because for the first time in a long while, I no longer felt invisible. I didn't yet know what lay ahead, but I knew tonight the distance between me and Noah no longer felt so far. The next morning, soft sunlight slipped through the thin curtains, casting a gentle golden hue across the ceiling. I opened my eyes to an unusual stillness. No alarm clock, no sound of a bustling city, only the steady murmur of distant waves and the occasional call of seabirds gliding past the old tiled roof. I went down to the kitchen and found a small note left on the table. Went for a run along the beach. Coffee's ready. I smiled softly. Noah's handwriting was just the same, precise, neat, just like his calm and steady nature he'd carried since childhood. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stood by the window, gazing out toward the sea. The surface shimmered like it had been dusted with light, each wave a gentle ripple, like the whisper of something unspoken. I hadn't brought an itinerary on this trip. There was nothing I had to do. I just wanted to listen to the life inside me. And surprisingly, Noah seemed to be moving in sync with that same quiet rhythm. When Noah returned, his shirt damp with sweat and sand clinging to the cuffs of his pants, he stepped into the kitchen and smiled, seeing me still holding my cup of coffee, standing there as if I hadn't moved. "I didn't wake you. You seem to be sleeping deeply." "It's been a long time since I had a dreamless night," I replied, turning away, hiding my gaze in the sunlit courtyard. Noah walked over and opened the fridge for some water. "I thought I'd clean up the backyard later. The wooden chairs are nearly falling apart." "I'll help you with that." "No need, just relax, Mom. This is your vacation." I said nothing more. But in that moment, the way Noah lifted the water jug, then leaned slightly to pour it into a glass, his hand trembling slightly from exertion, made me pause. Maybe because I realized he was no longer the boy I once cared for. He was now a man, someone quietly taking over the little responsibilities I used to shoulder. We spent the rest of the morning tidying up the yard, replacing broken planks, dusting off the stone bench, and trimming the overgrown casuarina hedge. Though the work wasn't hard, I had the distinct sense that it was one of the most meaningful mornings I'd had in years. Not because of anything grand, but because we were doing it together. No rush, no need to escape. As I was stacking a few folding chairs under the awning, I heard Noah call out, "No." I turned around. His eyes, perhaps from the sunlight or something else, suddenly looked very serious. "You're smiling more today than yesterday." I froze for a second, unsure how to respond to such a perceptive observation. He continued, his voice lower. "I used to think adults handled sadness better, but lately I realized sometimes adults are lonelier than we are." I looked at Noah for a long time. I didn't smile and look away. That simple sentence, so gentle, unlocked something I hadn't even realized I'd hidden inside. "Thank you," I whispered, "for seeing me." We sat together beneath the awning, each with a cool drink in hand, quietly watching the distant sea. No more words were needed, but I felt the space between us, once filled with years, roles, expectations, slowly dissolving into something sincere. That afternoon, we walked together to the beach. The sea was calm like glass. The waves barely brushed our feet, not enough to dampen the hem of my dress. Noah walked beside me, keeping just the right distance, but now and then he watched me carefully, perhaps unsure how to express the mixture of familiarity and change between us. I didn't ask. Some emotions, if spoken too soon, will vanish. And in that peaceful evening light, I began to understand something. Sometimes what unsettles us isn't what's been lost, but what's quietly taken shape, beyond our control, outside any plan. That evening, after a simple meal of grilled fish and steamed vegetables, we didn't rush to clean up. Noah brought chairs out to the yard and switched on the string lights we had hung up during a vacation the year before. The small, warm yellow bulbs stretched across the eaves, casting light over the stone patio where I used to sit and read when I was young. I took a cup of tea, stepped outside, and sat across from Noah. The space around us softened, like a quiet background melody that filled the silence without needing to be filled with words. Do you remember the first time you came to our house? Noah asked suddenly. I let out a soft laugh. Of course I do. You absolutely refused to call me mom back then. Noah nodded, taking a sip of water. I think I was afraid someone would replace my birth mother. But you never tried to push, you just stayed. I looked at him. I never wanted to replace anyone. I only wanted, if you ever needed someone, you know I was here. I know, Noah replied gently. And maybe because you didn't try, I slowly let you in. That sentence felt like a drop of water falling into an underground stream of emotion, ready to break open. I didn't respond. I simply looked into his eyes. So different now from the boy I used to hold hands with through holiday seasons. In his eyes now was the gaze of a man, gentle, deep, and perhaps confused by what he was beginning to feel. In that moment, I felt a clear shift, not sudden, not caused by anything specific, but a change born of a slow, quiet process. Maybe because we had lived too long within fixed roles, when something different began to form beyond those boundaries, it became hard to name. Noah stood up, brought back a thin blanket, handed it to me, then sat down again, this time a little closer. Can I ask you something personal? I hesitated slightly, then nodded. Are you happy? He asked softly, slowly, but without looking away. I gripped the teacup tighter. A simple question, yet one I had avoided asking myself for years. I think I once was. Then there were long stretches where I just tried to live the right way. And lately, I've started wondering, what does real happiness even look like? Noah stayed silent. I didn't know what he was thinking, but the small nod he gave afterward made me feel understood. Maybe, I continued, happiness isn't something grand. Maybe it's just being truly seen by someone. Noah turned to me, and what do you see now? I answered, my voice barely a whisper. I see a young man sitting across from me, and I see myself for the first time, not as a wife, not as a stepmother, but as a woman learning how to live honestly. We sat there, silent, as if any louder sound might shatter the fragile stillness. No one touched the other. But inside me, something was stirring, drifting backward through forgotten desires, to be cared for, not out of duty, to be seen, not because of a role. That night, I didn't fall asleep quickly. I lay in the room, listening to the wind rustle outside the window, my heart neither heavy nor light. A deeper understanding was growing between us, quiet, respectful, and grounded in shared years, but enough to make returning to how things once were impossible. Tomorrow morning, I thought, we'll go together to the local market, pick out some fruit, maybe a bundle of dried lavender, and who knows, maybe a new conversation, one where we continue trying to understand each other as real people, not just through titles. And maybe, just maybe, that's how two souls crossing paths learn how not to miss each other. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Pale golden sunlight slipped through the window frame, softly spreading across the cold wooden floor like a gentle reminder that a new day had begun. I threw on a light cardigan and headed downstairs, where everything was unusually quiet. Noah wasn't up yet. I took the chance to boil water and prepare coffee out of habit, my hands still echoing the feelings from the conversation the night before. I couldn't deny that my heart had been beating differently. But what did that mean? I still didn't dare to answer. The soft sound of footsteps on the wooden stairs startled me. Noah walked into the kitchen, his hair slightly tousled, a hint of sleep still lingering in his eyes. He smiled, a simple smile that made me turn away, unsure how to respond. "Good morning, Mom," he said, as if trying to remind himself of the distance that should remain between us. I nodded, setting the cup of coffee in front of him. "Did you sleep well?" He sat down across from me, a bit restless, maybe too many thoughts. I understood that feeling. Ambiguity often scares us less than having to face something clear that we're not yet ready to name. After breakfast, we drove to a small weekend market less than 20 minutes from the house. On the way, neither of us said much, but the silence between us no longer felt awkward. I turned on the radio and a soft jazz tune filled the space, gently calming the flurry of thoughts inside me. At the market, Noah stopped at a stall selling old books while I wandered over to the dried flower stand. I picked a simple bouquet of lavender. The vendor wrapped it in old newspaper and handed it to me with a quiet blessing. People often choose lavender when they want to hold on to something left unsaid. I nodded softly. Perhaps she was right. When we returned, the sky had turned gray. A breeze had picked up, carrying the scent of coming rain. We stepped into the kitchen and prepared lunch together, a seemingly simple task that today carried layers of unspoken meaning. Noah sliced the carrots while I made the broth. No one spoke, but I felt his presence in every breath I took. Briefly, I wondered, if I had met Noah in a different time, in a different role, could we have named this connection without having to quietly hold it back? Eleanor, Noah suddenly said, calling me by name, not Mom, as he usually did. I looked up. He said my name in a way that made me pause, surprised by how much he had grown. I'm sorry if last night I made you uncomfortable. I looked at him for a long moment, then shook my head gently. It wasn't discomfort, it's just, I never imagined there would come a day you grow up like this, grown enough that I start to forget you were once the little boy I walked to kindergarten. Noah chuckled. I didn't think you'd remember that clearly. There are things we hold in our hearts as a way to remember who we used to be. Silence settled in, but it no longer felt heavy. We ate lunch, washed the dishes, then sat on the porch watching the rain. No one brought up anything again. But I knew, from the moment Noah said my name, something had shifted. That night, I sat alone in my room, holding the book Noah had bought that morning at the market, a worn poetry collection. On the first page, he had quietly written in pencil, "People don't always love the wrong person. Sometimes they just love at the wrong time." I closed the book, my hand trembling slightly. There are reflections that couldn't be said aloud because some connections are meant to be understood, not acted upon. I walked to the window and looked down at Noah in the yard, holding an umbrella, walking the little dog in the rain, a scene both familiar and distant, and I made a quiet promise to myself. If there is something I can keep in my heart without hurting anyone, I will. Like lavender in an old newspaper wrapping. Still fragrant, even if never displayed in the center of the room. I don't remember exactly when I drifted off, only that when I opened my eyes, the room was bathed in the soft light of early morning. On a nightstand sat a cup of tea, now cold, and the poetry book from yesterday, still open to the page with Noah's handwritten note. I sat up, pulled on a sweater, and quietly went down to the kitchen. Noah was no longer there. The kitchen was bright and clean, as if everything had been arranged in preparation for me to begin the day. Peaceful, tidy, and silent. On the table, a small note was pinned beneath my drinking glass. Went out for a walk. No need to wait. Thank you for not turning away. I gently touched the words, not hurried, not demanding, just an expression of gratitude. And in them, I recognized a kind of mature restraint I had never seen so clearly before. Noah was learning how to understand his emotions and how to let go. If he had to, I brewed a fresh cup of tea, opened the patio door, and sat in the rocking chair where I often read. In the coolness of the morning air, everything seemed clearer, more real. In the garden below, the wild daisies still glistened from yesterday's rain, their heads bowed slightly, as if also learning the art of quiet. Near noon, I heard familiar footsteps on the wooden steps. Noah returned with dew on his coat, his eyes meeting mine, neither avoiding nor reaching beyond what should be. I smiled, gently, as if inviting an old friend to sit with me again. Did you go far? No, just far enough to hear my own thoughts clearly. We had lunch together, The conversation lingered on simple things: Noah's upcoming semester plans, the new pastries I wanted to try baking, and a few old memories of Noah's father that I had long kept in my heart but never spoken aloud. No one brought up the emotions that had strayed off course. There was no need. The silence between us today was no longer tense. It was a new kind of understanding. Close enough to be warm, far enough to feel safe. Before Noah packed up to return to school, I stepped into his room. On his desk was the bouquet of lavender I had brought back from the market. Beside it stood a small photo frame, a picture of the two of us sitting in the park when he was little. I remembered that moment. He had just fallen off his bike and I was holding him close. Wiping dirt-streaked tears from his cheeks, I walked over and adjusted the frame. Not because it was crooked, but because it deserved to be cherished. Noah stood at the door, watching me silently. Dried lavender still holds its scent if you store it right, I said, my eyes still on the photo. He smiled, and it doesn't need to be in the center of the room to be remembered. We hugged one last time before he got in the car. A long hug, long enough to heal. Long enough to know that we had passed through a gray space without losing what truly mattered: respect, companionship, and a deep respect that reestablished the healthy space between us. After he disappeared from view, I walked back inside, opened the large window, and let the scent of lavender drift gently through the breeze. I knew then. Some feelings come at the wrong time, but if looked at clearly, understood, and placed in their rightful space, they become a part of growth for both people. And I learned that love isn't always about holding on. Sometimes love is how we choose dignity and distance, honoring what matters most, and with all the humanity we have. My story, Eleanor's story, is not a love ballad. It is a gentle solo where high notes of empathy blend with silences of restraint and pauses are made to give space for growth. I once believed that loneliness within a marriage was the most painful thing, but I came to realize that what nearly broke me wasn't the absence of a man, but the feeling of no longer being seen as a living, breathing person. When Noah appeared, like a warm breeze slipping unknowingly through a crack, I was startled to realize I had quietly disappeared from my own life without even noticing. We stood at a delicate point, choosing to reconnect with respect rather than drift further apart. But in that moment, both of us chose clarity over surrendering to emotion. We didn't deny what had happened, but we didn't let it define us or the sacredness of this relationship. I learned that love does not have to mean possession. Sometimes love is looking into another's eyes, understanding their loneliness, and gently stepping back to preserve something even more beautiful than fleeting affection: respect. And Noah, the boy I once protected, who unexpectedly reminded me of who I was, taught me that every feeling, no matter how beautiful or mistimed, deserves to be heard, not to be pursued, but to be understood so that we might grow together within safe and rightful boundaries. This story has no fairy tale ending. It doesn't need one, because what I found in the end wasn't a new love, but the revival of myself. A woman who now knows she can still feel, still choose, and has the courage to move forward without losing her worth. That is what I cherish the most. And perhaps, for both of us, that is already enough.